From Paris, France, you're watching CardioSource video news coverage of ESC 2011.
Hello, I'm Tony DeMaria here at the European Society of Cardiology meetings in Paris, France, representing CVN. And I'm here with Chris Cannon to bring you the highlights of this European Society of Cardiology meeting. The biggest news so far, I think, Chris, is the ARISTOTLE trial, the trial of apixaban in patients with atrial fibrillation.
Well, this has been long awaited. It's the third of the new oral anticoagulant trials, has spectacular results. The top-line findings were that the primary efficacy endpoint, preventing stroke or systemic embolism, was superior, interestingly driven by a reduction in ischemic hemorrhagic stroke, largely. Also, mortality was lower, and so really a big win. And major bleeding also significantly reduced. So, all of the endpoints exactly what we'd be hoping for with the new anticoagulant.
Very exciting, and everybody's talking about it, but it took them 14,000 patients to show this reduction. So in fact, the absolute reduction in mortality was actually relatively small, less than 1%.
It's true that fortunately in AFib, stroke and death are relatively infrequent in the population as a whole, but obviously being able to improve on that in high-risk patients will turn into a bigger absolute benefit. I think one of the biggest problems in AFib is that so many patients aren't treated at all. And now we have agents that are convenient. This agent's twice a day, 5 milligrams twice a day, no INR testing needed. And so it hopefully can open the door to treating more patients in whom there'll be less bleeding and reductions in stroke.
Oh, absolutely. The convenience factor is really fabulous. And I guess for the practitioner, one of the issues is going to be, well, now you have apixaban, you have rivaroxaban, you have dabigatran, and how does one choose between these agents, all of which have shown a favorable profile relative to warfarin?
It's very true, and a colleague, Jess Mega, did a nice editorial looking at the three different trials, pointing out that there are a lot of similarities across the different trials of the new anticoagulants. Just dabigatran at the U.S. approved dose of 150 milligram had a reduction in ischemic stroke. All of them showed a reduction in hemorrhagic stroke, and the trends on mortality were similar, although significant only with apixaban. And so moving the field to the new anticoagulants, I think, is helpful to have three different agents to say that, look, the era of warfarin is probably passing.
Yeah, certainly for new patients, it looks like that's true. For patients who've been well controlled for years on warfarin, I think my own feeling has been probably to let them go ahead with that therapy.
Interestingly, people often like the contact with the INR checking, and that's another healthcare interaction, which is probably beneficial. But the very high and low INRs always scare me, and so this may be something that, slowly there'll be transition, but
Sure.
Exciting time.
Again, we can reverse warfarin relatively quickly. Specific reversal agents for the new thrombin or 10A inhibitors haven't been identified yet.
That's true. There's a poster being presented here of an agent that can reverse a 10A inhibitor, and so exciting stuff, not approved yet, but work being done in that area.
No question. Now, one of the other most interesting studies that came out was the so-called cream and sugar study, where they adapted the principle of glucose tolerance testing to triglyceride tolerance testing. They gave a heavy cream and fat dose to look at triglycerides, and what they found was that in patients who were glucose intolerant, triglycerides really were of no significance. But in patients who were not glucose intolerant, then the inability to handle triglycerides actually was a predictor of events. So it may be that in the future we'll be giving people loads of fat and cream to see how they handle it.
Well, very important. And triglycerides have been sort of the other lipid, and it's still not clear how aggressive we should be on that, but certainly something that we'll need to pay attention to, I guess, in the lower risk patients, interestingly.
Well, lots more studies, lots more late-breaking clinical trials. We'll be back in just a short while.